Hello, and welcome to Late Night Play Reviews with ya boy. So, tonight we're going to be looking at the Octoroon, which was written by Dion. I would try to say his last name, but it's French. Well, it sounds French. It is Irish, and I'm not that skilled. So, his name is Dion. He was born December 26th in 1820 in Dublin, Ireland, and he died December 13th, 1901 in New York City. Seems pretty fitting for a playwright and actor, doesn't it? He was famous for his melodramas and known on both sides of the ocean as one of the most successful playwrights. His obituary even lists him as, and I quote, one of the most conspicuous English, he was actually Irish, side note, playwrights of the 19th century. So, as far as the Octoroon goes, I didn't actually watch it, but I'm 90% sure the version I have lists the original cast, which is pretty chill, and it was super popular in its era, so I would say it was probably Broadway, or at least close to Broadway quality of today, just because of how popular it was and all of the stuff I found about it. So, right away, one of the first things I noticed was the I dialect in this play. The I dialect is when the author writes the play in the way it would be spoken by the characters. It was used a lot back in older plays because you had to make everything really obvious right up front because they didn't have microphones or props or anything like that much. So you had to help clear that up. It is truly a product of its era, as it starts off with some blatant racism, even going so far as to use the N-word, like, I believe 6 or 7 sentences in, of dialogue, not of actions. If we include actions, probably 11 sentences, don't quote me on that. A point is also made that the young black children weren't born on the plantation, but rather they swarmed one morning on a sassafras tree in the swamp, which doesn't sound like the best entrance if you ask me. Beyond this, the play does do an excellent job at the demonstration of the tragic mulatto, which is a genre of the era. The specific subset was the first option for the definition I was given, which was a woman can pass for white, but she's, like, in this case, 1/8 black, hence the title Octoroon. And the woman falls in love with a white man, and then it's exposed that she's 1/8 black, and then, well, it ends in tragedy. After she's found out to be biracial, she's often thrown back into the slave trade and just circled right on back through that system, so that's great. Now, the main character, Zoe, admittedly had a problem with her lack of backstory beyond the bare minimum, whereas the dead Dr. Peyton got more backstory and he's dead, so that's great. However, even though she's only 1/8 black, as I just said, that's enough to be considered a slave because the one-drop rule, which I do want to mention, I did not learn from my history books, so this does have some historical inaccuracies, like the slaves being happy about being slaves. Don't think that happened, just call me crazy. However, I did not learn about the one-drop rule in my history books. It may have been, like, passively mentioned in a paragraph, but I read those like they were fiction when I was a kid, because I was in online school, and all my friends were at school, and I was bored. So I read a lot of them, and they were all very repetitive. So that covers the basics of Zoe, and McCloskey steals the papers that show she's not actually a slave because she was freed by her previous mistress, which was a good move on her. However, it was a dick move for McCloskey, hope I'm saying that right, to kill little Paul and steal the $50,000 money order to pay bills, which caused the plantation to get sold, which was part of the basically entire reason that Zoe was sold, because he also stole her paperwork that shows she wasn't a slave anymore, which is great, by the way. 10 out of fucking 10. Good move, dude. Just kidding, don't do that. Alright, now, Dora is also an important character in the play. She is your problematic least fave. At least she's my problematic least fave. She's part of the central conflict with George because she loves him too. And of course, Zoe can't be with him because of the whole, 1/8 black thing. So Zoe's telling him, go be with her. You can actually be with her. It's legal. Congrats, go do it. And, George is, of course, saying, no, I'm gonna run away with you. I love you. I don't care about her. I don't need her. I want you. which is a good move on his part, I feel like. Controversial at the time, yes, but a good move. But at the end of as we come up to the end of the story, it gets a little bit fuzzy. Like in the beginning, it's full of details and very, very well written. I feel like as we get towards the end of it, it gets a little bit fuzzier and a little bit less detailed. What I got from it, for sure, was that Zoe was indeed sold into slavery when the plantation was sold, and she's bought by none other than Mr. McCloskey himself. This, of course, basically crushes George's heart and dreams, who, I may mention, fell in love with her before we found out she was an Octoroon. Hey, there's that tragic mulatto coming into play. However, Suckder, you good boy. I don't think I said that right, but it's fine. He's a good boy, and he shows up with a camera that the native was filming McCloskey with when he stole the letters and killed the kid. And he shows up with the evidence. But by the time he shows up with proof, it's too late. Zoe is dead from poison, and the only reason she took it was so that she wouldn't have to be McCloskey's slave. Even though if she had just waited for a few more minutes, she would have been free and clear to go, like, marry George or whatever they wanted to do. So that in and of itself reminded me a little bit of Romeo and Juliet, just because, like, if you had waited a couple seconds, you would have been fine and clear, but go off, I guess. Tragic ending, right? It's not tragic mulatto if someone doesn't die. Haha. However, since I read the play, I didn't watch it, I can't really discuss unique elements of acting. And also, since I read before, I'll say this was the premiere, so I read the premiere of the original cast. How neato is that? But the play itself is the first one of its kind that I've read. Shocking. I know. But this is something that we do need to learn about as a part of history, because if we don't, well, you know what they say. Those who don't learn their history are doomed to repeat it. The play does match up with the theme of our class because it covers a lot about racism and sexism. But I personally found it was more focused on race because, I mean, in the 20th century, yeah, we all know how it was. I learned more about some of the local things, I guess you'd say, about slavery in the 20th century than I did from my history books. That's another topic for another day, though. History books, those are great. So, last, not least, I will say that I believe this production was successful in its day for a different reason than it would be successful today. And now hear me out. I wouldn't say it'd be successful as in it'd be popular, because it would be widely hated, I'm guessing, I'm hoping. But in its day, it was popular because it was relatable. It was a tragedy that in the 19th and 20th century was considered entertainment. They wanted to hear and read stories about this. They wanted tragic mulattoes. They wanted the racism and the sexism in their plays because that's how the culture was. Today, it would be successful as a statement. If it were used to remind us of what happened, as sort of a narrative that is painfully inaccurate in some ways, and yet very educational in other ways. Like, it explains more about racism from a different perspective, as I've said, I think already, than my history books have. And I'm not entirely sure how that made me feel, but it caused a feeling. And I didn't like it. In fact, I didn't like any of the feelings I got reading this play. In fact, I kinda hated it. But it's a part of history. It's part of American and European history, and if we just sort of sweep it under the rug, we'll never be able to really own up to our mistakes, or learn from the past, or show younger generations, hey, this is why you don't do this. Here's why. It goes bad every time. So, I know I just said I hated the play. I didn't like reading it. It was a bad experience because I don't have those beliefs. I like to think of myself as not being racist. I'm not perfect, but I do my best. Me over here with all my white privilege. But would I recommend this play? Would I recommend reading it? Yes, if you got the time. It's 42 pages, I think the front page said, but that's including the cast and the title page, so it's really 40 pages. So it's not all too long of a read for those of you who are used to reading like 200-page plays. But those of you who read mainly magazine articles might have a bit of a time reading this. So if you want to read it, go for it. It's 5 acts, 40 pages. Not bad, not too long, not too short. Not too short if you ask me. Excuse that. If by some strange occurrence there's a company doing it near you, I would find out if they're doing the original cast, because as I mentioned, they've got some really bad language in there, at least really bad by our standards now. Back then it was normal, I gotta remember that. So it depends on how you know that would make you feel. If you know that you would not handle it well, I would not recommend seeing it or reading it. If you want to explore it, it was certainly very interesting for me to read. I feel like that's a really bad way of putting it. But if a company is performing it, find out if they're doing the original script, because it's got some words in it, TM, that are not good. And it's up to you if you want to expose yourself to that. Personally, I might go see it once, just for the sake of saying, yeah, I read it and I saw it, but I wouldn't put forth any effort in seeing it. Like, I wouldn't drive across the state to go see it. If it was happening locally, I might pop by, but if it was happening locally, I'd be a little concerned as well. One good thing about this is that it makes you think about how people behaved in this era, specifically the relationship as everyone was getting freed and such, and how the culture was changing between the different races. And it definitely gives you a look at some of the sexist undertones featured in this as well, like having to sell the plantation because a woman can't run it. Cough, cough. Huh, love it. 10 out of 10. But on the other hand, I will admit, if you look at the base parts of the play, it has a character to hate, character to sympathize with, character to love, drama, money, paperwork theft. Who doesn't love office work? Love triangle. Dora. And don't forget murder. It's a key part of any good play, right? Now, the original script would not go over well today unless it was used as a statement piece. However, I want to quote the Censored 11, the one animation company that refused to delete their old racist cartoons, and they said it would be like pretending it never happened, and we can't do that because it's very important that, especially the people who own slaves, it's especially important that they remember this happened. It's important that everyone remember this happened because we don't want it to happen again. At least that's how I'm feeling. So overall, I feel like the play was good for its era. I can see why it would have been popular. I can see how it could be used today as a statement piece. Not necessarily as just say, hey, let's go watch this in the theater. That'll go swimmingly. Don't see that going very well. But it covers a lot of sensitive issues in the way that they were originally spoken of. So, it's sort of a mixed review for me. It was good for some things, bad for some other things. It had points that needed to be made and we need to remember were a thing. It has points that still happen today. Like I said, a lot of those things I listed it has, once you get past the blatant racism and sexism, they're in like everything. Even modern shows. Love triangles. It's a big fucking trope right now. Pardon my French for this video. So, I would recommend it as a read once. I would recommend that you read it once. if you choose to, if you want to look at this yourself. I don't think this is going to be something I'm going to go back to unless I probably could come up with a reason to reference it at some point. I mean, history of theater is very important, and as much as we'd like to pretend the theater has always been accepting and welcoming, it hasn't. I mean, in Shakespeare's era, they weren't allowed to have women actors, so they had to have guys dress up as women to go play the characters, because it was illegal. That's for the next video, though. So, I want you to decide for yourself whether this was a good play or not. I want you to go read it, and I want you to explore it. And then, I want you to let yourself think about it for a while. I've been thinking about it for a few hours. I read it earlier today, typed up some notes on it, and it's given me a lot to think about. And I hope it will give anyone else who reads it a lot to think about. If it doesn't, I guess that's okay. Maybe you've already thought about it. Maybe you don't care. It's not my business. So I would recommend it as like a once-over. I wouldn't say that it's my favorite play ever. I wouldn't say it's my least favorite play ever, because every piece of art served a purpose in its time, and it can serve a purpose today. Sometimes that purpose is a warning. So I want you to let me know what you think of the play after you read it, or you watch it, or you watch someone else's review of it. Tell me how you felt about it. Alright. Good night, guys. I'll see you next time.